Hey there and welcome to my channel. It's me here with another artifact that could have been an ancient battery. This one is called the Baghdad Battery, and it comes from the ancient Mesopotamian city of Baghdad in Iraq. It dates back to around 250 BC, which means it would have been created during the Parthian Empire. We actually don't know exactly where it was found. The guy who found it apparently sold it to a museum in Istanbul in 1936, so we don't even know if it really came from Baghdad. But the people who collected it thought that it did. And this story has been repeated so many times now that I guess we can just assume that's where it came from. It was included in a larger collection of artifacts and only cost around $70. They didn't realize its potential significance until much later. When they finally realized that they had something really special, they sent it to the British Museum in London, where it's been ever since. And that's why it's sometimes known as the London Jar. You can go see it for yourself in the museum today, but it's not on display all the time. It looks like an ordinary clay jar with a small hole in the bottom and two holes on the side. But believe it or not, it could be one of humanity's earliest batteries. So how does it work? Well, inside the jar is a copper cylinder wrapped around the lip of the jar, and at the bottom there's an iron nail or spike. The holes on the side are sealed with wax so nothing can get in or out, and the hole at the bottom is sealed with a metal plug. It's possible that this plug could be removed, and that's probably how the battery would have been used. So you put the plug in the hole, then you fill the jar with something acidic, like vinegar. Then you place whatever you want to power into the other hole, like a piece of cloth or maybe a very early light bulb. The acid would flow from the bottom to the top through the copper pipe. As it flowed, it would give up its electrons and charge the object made of iron. If you connect the two together with a wire, you make a circuit and electricity flows. So this may very well be one of the world's first batteries. But how did the ancient Mesopotamians use it? We have no idea. Batteries like these were not discovered again for another 2,000 years. That means that if this is what we think it is, the people who lived in Mesopotamia invented the battery completely independently from modern scientists, but I'm not so sure it was a battery at all. There are some serious problems with this theory. First of all, we don't know what was inside the jar. We do know that it was hollow because X-rays taken in the 1970s revealed an empty chamber inside, but we don't know what was inside that chamber. It may have been water or some other liquid, but we don't know for sure. Also, we don't know if the contents were acidic. Sure, vinegar is acidic, but so are a lot of other things. And vinegar wasn't even invented until about 5,000 years ago. So there was plenty of time for other acids to develop independently in Mesopotamia. Perhaps palm sap, for example, contains high levels of acid, but even if it did contain acid, that doesn't mean it was used as a battery. The people of ancient Mesopotamia were smart enough to know that certain liquids could damage metals. Just look at the copper scroll from Qumran, which warns against letting copper come into contact with water. Could they really have been stupid enough to build a battery without realizing that the acid would eat away at the iron? It seems unlikely. And if it was water, it wouldn't have worked anyway because you need a saltwater solution to conduct electricity. Finally, we have no idea what was plugged into the hole on the side of the jar. Whoever found it said that it looked like a light bulb socket, but that's hardly surprising considering that light bulbs were invented over 100 years ago. If you drop a coin next to the jar, it will eventually become electroplated with copper. That's because the copper ions from the acid will jump onto the coin, which is made of copper. But if you put a piece of cloth into the jar, it will just absorb the copper ions. It won't become charged. So unless the ancient Mesopotamians were crazy enough to build a battery but not smart enough to use it properly, whatever they plugged into this jar wasn't designed to receive a current. Okay, so it wasn't a battery, right? Wrong. A researcher named Sami Shoshani took a different approach to the problem. Instead of trying to figure out what the jar could have been used for, he tried to figure out what it couldn't have been used for. After studying it with his colleagues, they concluded that the jar could not have been used as a perfume bottle, a candlestick, a toy, or a musical instrument, which makes sense. Who would have wanted to listen to a jar being electrocuted? Then they decided that it couldn't have been used as a storage container. That's because when you put acid into a jar, it will react with the clay and weaken it. That means that the jar would slowly start to break apart. It also couldn't have been a vase because plants grow towards the light. and if you put a plant in this jar, the light would have killed it. So what else could it have been used for? Well, they concluded that it must have been designed to hold human remains, maybe ashes, or maybe the preserved remains of a body. It must have been placed upright and buried underground. Over time, the acid would have leached out of the jar and into the ground. Meanwhile, the iron rod would have reacted with the oxygen in the air and formed iron oxide. This would have protected the copper from corrosion and kept it in good condition. That explains why we can still see the writing on it. Otherwise, it would have disappeared. It also explains why there's a small hole at the bottom. It allowed gas to escape as the acid leaked out. There are two pieces of evidence that support this. First, scientists found traces of burnt human bone inside the jar. Second, archaeologists found a similar jar nearby that had a much bigger hole at the bottom. That jar didn't contain any human remains, so it must have been used for something else. Because the hole was so big, it would have broken apart after only a few days, but if it was used for holding cremated remains, it would have lasted long enough to preserve them. This may seem like a far-fetched idea, but it actually makes a lot more sense than trying to use it as a battery. And there's one thing that really bothers me about this whole story. I can't find a single source that describes this amazing discovery in detail. Most of the information I found was either incorrect or incomplete. That's why I started this channel. I want to tell these stories myself and make sure that they stay alive so that future generations never forget them. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.